What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 54 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. I'm your host, Zach Malamu. Before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the NBA as the New York Knicks are in action tomorrow night, a 7:30 start at MSG, and the 36-18 New York Knicks taking on the 22-33 Chicago Bulls. And I mentioned the 7:30 start. When you look at the Knicks, they're coming off of the All-Star break, and now it's their first game back. And I think it's really a big time this season for the Knicks to really step up here. As you look at now the Knicks' upcoming schedule after this game against Chicago, how about at Cleveland, at Boston, then home to Philly, and then you got two games on the road at Memphis and Miami. So, really, really tough stretch here for the Knicks, and they have to come back strong from that All-Star break, but you're expecting a lot from this New York team. And I think in the end, this is a Chicago Bulls team that has had the Knicks number just a little bit so far this season. Two games against the Knicks so far, home and away, and the Bulls won each of them. They lead the season series 2-0. So the Knicks really have a lot of pressure on them here to bounce back after those couple of losses to Chicago. They need to bounce back with a win in this one coming off the All-Star break. So this is a big-time game for the New York Knicks, and you're expecting everybody to really be back, and there are some game time decisions. You got Deuce McBride, OG Anunoby are two of the main guys that are game time decisions for this one. A guy like OG Anunoby obviously has been out since before the All-Star break, and you're hoping that he gets back to 100% health before you end up putting him back in the lineup. And a game like this against the Chicago Bulls with a back-to-back, then going to Cleveland for Friday's game, you're probably going to be better off resting a guy like OG Anunoby and then putting him back in for the game against Cleveland. That's if he's not 100% just yet. Obviously, if he's 100%, that's a guy that, of course, they would slot in the lineup very easily in OG Anunoby. So we'll see what happens, but obviously some noise on that. And on the other side for Chicago, some game time decisions for them as well. Patrick Williams as well as Alonzo Ball, both game time decisions. But a 7:30 start tomorrow night. Make sure you tune in. The 22-33 Chicago Bulls taking on the 36-18 New York Knicks at MSG. And then you look at the Knicks games after this. Just a quick look at these games, and Cleveland and Boston coming up. You're looking at the Chicago game and saying, all right, well, win this one, and then you get those two games. And I think the big time thing for the New York Knicks, and we'll talk about each of these games as they come up, but those two games are absolutely massive for the New York Knicks. And looking at this playoff picture, they have to prove themselves. Whether they can get all the way up to the 2 seed, they have to win games like this. I think that's really so important for New York. And if they could get some home court advantage over a team like the Boston Celtics, probably not going to catch a team like Cleveland, but you never know. Obviously, still a little bit of season left for all of these teams, and Boston could mount a comeback and take over that 1 seed. The Knicks, even so, can have a comeback and take over that 1 seed as well. But they have to do it quickly here, and if they are going to do it, they have to win these games on the road. Cleveland and Boston, or just take one of them, just prove themselves just a little bit. So we'll see what happens, but they have to win that game against Chicago tomorrow night, and from there, you really look at those Cleveland and Boston games as almost must wins for the Knicks to really prove whether they are or aren't one of those top teams in the Eastern Conference. Let's finish things off today with a college basketball update. Let's start off with yesterday's games, and really straightforward with a lot of these games, but there were some upsets and monster games from teams in the NCAA. And when you look at, let's start off with a big upset, and it comes down in Fort Worth as TCU knocked off number 9 Texas Tech 69-66, and Texas Tech handed their 6th loss of the season, 4th loss in Big 12 play. Probably just hurts the chances of Texas Tech winning a Big 12 title, as Houston won yesterday as well. So that did not help Tech's case to push towards that Big 12 regular season. But I mean, it really proves that Houston is the top team in the Big 12 by far. 22-4 on the year, 14-1 in Big 12 play. Now Tech, they moved to 20-6 on the year, 11-4 in Big 12 play. So 3 games back now of Houston, and TCU with a massive win, and obviously a team that struggled this year. They still are 15-11 and 8-7 in Big 12 play, and kind of beating up on some good teams. So a big time win for the Horned Frogs, and still holding out hope that they can make it into March. And obviously that's a big time win for the Horned Frogs down in Fort Worth. The other game I'll talk about, one of them is number 14 Michigan State, technically knocking off number 13 Purdue. This one was played at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, Michigan. And when you look at Michigan State in this one, great second half from them after a strong first half. They led 33-31 in a half that they probably didn't play that well in their minds. And obviously they struggled a bit when it came to shooting early in that one, but mounted a comeback and then really just finished things off in the second half. And when you look at Michigan State now, they are 12-3 in the Big Ten, and they're a game behind their rival across Michigan in Ann Arbor, the Michigan Wolverines. Just 1 game back, or actually a half game back, and they end up taking on Michigan Friday. So make sure you tune into that one, because that's going to be a monster game in the Big Ten, and obviously one that really holds a lot of proven points towards first place in the Big Ten Conference. So make sure you tune into that one. But a monster win here, and Purdue's kind of fallen off just a little bit. How about 3 straight losses for the Purdue Boilermakers in 3 games that you're probably saying, all right, well, probably should win 2 of 3 in those and figure things out. And they win none of them, and probably thought they could maybe get 1, probably wanted 2, and they get none. And that was at Michigan last week, then versus Wisconsin at Mackey Arena, home on the weekend, and then another loss on the road midweek as they go to Michigan State and lose there. So big time for Purdue, and have to really bounce back after these losses, and I think they really need to prove a point here in the Big Ten. Now 5 losses. Who would have expected that? Obviously some losses, and of course you're losing a guy like Zach Edey last season, and that's not going to help you heading into this year, and especially when they really are struggling down low without a guy like a Zach Edey. And Trey Kaufman-Renn doing all he can for Purdue right now, but it's just not enough, and they need some more production outside of Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith. That's really the key right now for the Boilermakers, but they moved to 19-8 on the year. Definitely going to take a nice drop in the rankings as they right now sit 13th in the AP poll. Another upset from yesterday, and this one didn't seem like an upset and shouldn't have been an upset, because BYU definitely got the raw end of the stick when it came to the AP poll, as they came into the game 17-8, not and 8-6, excuse me, in Big 12 play. They blew the doors off of Kansas, number 23 Kansas, who's not going to be number 23 anymore. They lose 91-57. And a monster first half, 46-26 at halftime, capped off by an even better second half, 45-31. BYU outscores Kansas. So, I mean, what a monster game overall for BYU. And this is a monster game and a prove it type of game for this BYU team. And I think it's just a great win overall, and one that proves that they are definitely a top 25 team, excuse me, and one of the top teams in the Big 12. So they're going to keep racking up wins, and that is a tough place to play up in Provo, Utah. So with really a lot of points proven here by BYU and Kansas. I mean, they are just a disaster since the early parts of this season. Cannot win on the road in Big 12 play. And if you can't win on the road in Big 12 play, how are you going to win in March? So that's going to be a big turnaround for Bill Self, and his guys have to really bounce back after a very rough loss here to BYU. So we'll see what happens. But now let's move this to Wednesday's games and tonight's games. It's really not too much, but a big one. definitely down in Columbia, Missouri, as number 4 Alabama takes on number 15 Missouri at Mizzou Arena, 9 o'clock tonight. Make sure you tune into this one. It's going to be a great one, as Missouri actually right now is 1.5 point favorites. And obviously number 4 Alabama, they are coming off the loss to Auburn, so they need to bounce back here. Do you think really Nate Oates' guys are going to drop two in a row? I'm not too sure about that. I know Mizzou Arena is a very tough place to play. It's going to be rocking there, but Alabama puts up points like no other team in college basketball, and I think they'll end up getting the win on the road. Auburn is in action, the number 1 team in the country. They host Arkansas, probably going to handle things down in Auburn, Alabama. And then you got a Kentucky team that is just dealing with injury after injury. And Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler both out once again in this one. They take on Vanderbilt at Rupp Arena. And Kentucky still, without those two guys, 4.5 point favorites. They're number 17 on the year. 17-8 though, and 6-6 in SEC play. Need to rack up some more wins in SEC play. And I know that SEC is the top conference, clearly, and definitely, in my opinion, the top conference in college basketball. But a team like Kentucky, I mean, they have a name for themselves, and obviously at 6-6, that's just not really good enough in conference play. This is a team that has very high aspirations. They still are number 17 with all of the ranked wins that they have come up with, including a couple of wins over Tennessee. So, I mean, really big time wins, and then another win on their home floor a couple months ago over Florida. So, I mean, they have some really, really strong wins and obviously have to keep that going. So, monster game for them tonight without their two-star players in Butler and Robinson, but they take on Vandy at Rupp Arena at 7 o'clock. Finally, St. John's in action tonight, number 10. They are ranked right now. They're on the road at Wintrust Arena in Chicago to take on DePaul. Game that the Johnnies have probably been waiting for, and one that they're almost taking a deep breath on. They should handle this one after a very, very tough stretch of games that they went through. When you talk about they took on Marquette, then at UConn, then at Nova, then versus Creighton. I mean, 4 teams that are really strong. And although Nova, really their record doesn't speak for it, I do think Nova's a much better team than their record says. And that's even something coming off the loss last night where they had a big lead in the second half over UConn. So tough stretch of games. And finally, Rick Pitino gets a bit of a almost breather here when you look at this DePaul team that they should probably beat up on. And then you look forward to Sunday's game at the Garden. What a game it's going to be as UConn comes to town and takes on St. John's at MSG, just like the old days. So it should be a good one. Make sure you tune into all of those games tonight, and then look forward to some games tomorrow as well. But it should be a great time in college basketball, and obviously so many games coming up this weekend. We'll preview all of those on Friday's episode. But that'll do it for episode 54 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malaman. Thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Friday.